Hello, my little love. Did you have a good day today? I hope something made you smile. Now take a slow breath, relax your shoulders, and let your mind get soft and quiet. It's time for a gentle bedtime story. Once upon a time, in a world that was greener and quieter and more full of gentle wonder than anything you can quite imagine, there lived a young woman named Echo, who had the most beautiful voice in all the forests and all the hills and all the wide green valleys of the world. Echo was a nymph, which means she was one of the spirits of the natural places, the beings who lived in the rivers and the trees and the meadows and the mountains and kept them company and kept them well. The nymphs were not gods exactly, not as vast and ancient as the great gods of the sky and the sea, but they were more than ordinary, full of a quiet magic that expressed itself in small and beautiful ways. In the particular shimmer of light on a certain pond, in the way a certain stand of birch trees glowed silver at dusk, in the sound a certain brook made in a certain stretch of its course where the stones were arranged just so. Echo lived in the forests and on the hillsides, and she loved to talk. She loved it the way some people love music or movement, deeply and naturally, as an expression of who she fundamentally was. When she was happy, she put it into words, describing the happiness and what had caused it and what it felt like and how it was different from other happinesses she had known. When she found something beautiful, she talked about it, turning it over in language the way you might turn a beautiful stone in your hands, examining it from different angles, finding new things to say about it. She had a gift for this, for finding the exact right words for things, and her voice was lovely, clear and warm and full of a natural music that made whatever she said pleasant to listen to regardless of the content, the way some people's voices are simply good to be near. The other nymphs loved her company. The gods who walked in the forests found her amusing and delightful. The animals of the woods, who understood more than they are usually given credit for, would pause in their business and listen when Echo passed by. The birds going quiet to hear this other kind of music, the deer, lifting their heads from the grass with their soft ears turned toward the sound of her voice. But Echo had a habit that sometimes got her into gentle trouble, and the trouble came from the same place as the gift, which is often how it is. She talked so much and so readily and so enjoyably that sometimes she talked when it would have been wiser to be quiet. She filled silences that wanted to be left full of themselves. She talked when others were thinking. She talked when the moment called for stillness. Not out of selfishness, not out of any wish to dominate or diminish anyone else, but simply because talking was so natural to her that silence felt unfamiliar, the way it feels unfamiliar to a fish to be out of water, not painful exactly, but not quite right. One day, Echo was in the forest when Hera, who was a great and queenly goddess, came walking through the trees on some private errand, thinking her own thoughts, which were deep and complex and needed quiet to develop properly. Echo, delighted to have such illustrious company, began to talk, the way she always began, easily, and with genuine pleasure, talking about the forest and the quality of the light that afternoon and the particular birds she had heard and 100 other things. All of them interesting in their own way, none of them what Hera needed in that moment. Hera listened for a while with patience, and then with less patience, and finally, she stopped walking and turned to Echo and said, with great kindness but also with great directness, The way truly wise people speak when something important needs to be said. Echo, my dear. You have a beautiful voice and a wonderful gift for words. But you use it so constantly that you have no room for listening. And listening is where words come from. If you never stop talking long enough to hear what the world is saying to you, then after a while your words will have no new things in them. They will only be reflections of what has already been said. Echo heard this. She truly heard it, because she was not, underneath all the talking, someone who did not listen. She was just someone who had not yet learned to make enough space for listening, which is a different thing. She was quiet for a moment, which was unusual enough to feel significant. Then she said, I did not know I was making so much noise. Hera smiled, because there was something so honest in this. You were not making noise, she said. You were making words. They are beautiful words. But the world also speaks in other languages, and if you want to understand them you will need to be still enough to hear them. Hera continued on her way through the forest, and Echo stood in the warm, dappled light among the trees and thought about what had been said. She stayed still for a long while. Longer than she had been still in a very long time. And in that stillness, she began to hear things she had not noticed before. She heard the trees, not just the sound of wind in their leaves, which she had always noticed because it was large enough to break through even her talking. But smaller sounds, the tiny creak of a branch settling, the minute rustling of a bird shifting position deep inside a bush, the sound of something growing, so slow and so quiet that you had to be very, very still to catch even the hint of it, a whisper of life simply continuing. She heard the stream that ran at the bottom of the hill, which she had always known was there but had not truly listened to before. And she discovered that the stream was not making one sound but many, different notes as the water moved over different stones, and that if you listened long enough, you could begin to hear something almost like a pattern in it, almost like music, almost like something trying to be understood. She heard the wind as it came over the hilltop and moved down through the forest. And she heard how it was different in the pine trees than in the oaks, how the pines caught it with their long needles and made it into something high and sustained. And the oaks turned it into something fuller and more complicated, and the beech trees along the stream did something else again. A softer and more intimate sound, like a conversation being held just low enough that you cannot quite make out the words. And she heard, beneath all of these sounds, something she had no name for yet but that felt like the sound of the world simply being alive. A deep and very quiet hum that was not really a sound at all, but was something you felt rather than heard, in your chest, in the soles of your feet, in the place inside you where you know things before you can say them. Echo sat with all of this for a long time. She felt something changing inside her, not a sudden change, not a dramatic one, but the kind of change that happens when something you have always known in a shallow way begins to go deeper, puts roots down, becomes real in a more complete way. When she finally spoke, which she did eventually because she was still Echo and always would be, what she said was different. She said, I had no idea it was so full. The quiet, I mean. I thought quiet was empty, but it is the fullest thing I have ever been inside. She began, after that day, to practice something she had never practiced before. She practiced listening first and speaking second. She would go to a place, the forest or the hillside or the edge of the stream, and she would simply be there for a while. Taking it in, hearing what it was saying, and only then would she find her words. And something remarkable happened. Her words became better. Not because she spoke more carefully or chose more deliberately, though she did both of those things, but because now her words were coming from a different place. They were coming from what she had heard as well as what she had thought. And this made them fuller and truer and more resonant, the way a song is richer when it has more notes in it. The other nymphs noticed the change. The birds noticed it in a different way, becoming even quieter when Echo passed now. As if sensing that she was listening as well as speaking and finding this even more interesting than before. And then one afternoon Echo was in a high meadow near the top of a long hill, sitting in the warm grass with the sky very wide and blue above her and the sound of the wind in the grass all around her, when she saw a young man walking along the path that crossed the meadow. His name was Narcissus, and he was one of those people who stop your breath a little when you see them because there is something in the way they hold themselves that is very striking, something in the clarity of their features that is arresting. He walked with the ease of someone who had always moved through the world comfortably. Which he had, because he was beautiful and had always been admired, and this had shaped him in ways he was not yet fully aware of. He was walking alone and looking at the ground as he walked, not sadly, but thoughtfully, with the expression of someone who is carrying a question they do not quite know how to ask. Echo watched him come across the meadow and felt something she had not felt before, a kind of warmth that was specific to him, to the way he was looking at the ground. With that thoughtful expression, to the way the afternoon light fell on his hair. She felt a pull toward him, a wanting to speak that was more particular and more private than her usual wanting to speak. She followed him, quietly, which was easier for her now than it would have been before, because she had been practicing quiet. She moved through the trees at the edge of the meadow with her footfalls soft and her voice, for once, held inside her. She watched him come to a place where a pool of water lay still and clear at the bottom of a small hollow, ringed by smooth stones and overhung by a willow tree that trailed its long fingers in the water. The pool was one of the most beautiful places in the forest, perfectly still, perfectly clear, reflecting the sky and the willow and everything around it so precisely that it was sometimes hard to know where the real thing ended and the reflection began. Narcissus knelt at the edge of the pool to drink, which was why he had come. And as he leaned over the water and saw his own face looking back at him, something happened that was more complicated than it might appear. He had seen his reflection many times before, in pools and in streams and in the polished surfaces that people sometimes kept for that purpose. But something about this pool, its extraordinary stillness, its perfect clarity, the way the willow framed it and the light lay on it at that particular afternoon angle, made the reflection more vivid and more present than any he had seen before. It looked not like a reflection but like someone looking back at him from a different world. Someone who was him and yet separate, someone whose eyes had a depth and a feeling in them that he did not quite recognize. And Narcissus, who had always been admired and who understood admiration, found himself feeling something different. He found himself wondering about the person in the water, wanting to know them, leaning toward them with a curiosity that was genuine and real. He did not realize right away that what he was looking at was himself. Echo, watching from the trees, understood what was happening before Narcissus did, because she was watching from outside, and could see the whole picture, which is always easier. She saw the beautiful young man kneeling at the edge of the beautiful pool, looking at his own reflection with an expression of wondering and wishing, and she felt something tender and a little sad, not for herself, but for him, because she could see that what he was reaching toward was his own image, and that no matter how long he reached, the distance between himself and his reflection would always be exactly the same. She came out from the trees. Narcissus heard her footstep and looked up, and his expression changed from the inward dreaming look to something more present and more questioning. Echo did not say the first thing that came into her head, which was her old habit. She waited for a moment, feeling for the right thing, listening for it the way she had learned to listen for what the world was saying. Then she said, gently and without any judgment, "What do you see?" Narcissus looked back at the pool. He was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone being truly honest with themselves, which takes a little longer than being untrue. Then he said, "I thought I saw someone, but I think it is only me." Echo came and knelt beside him at the edge of the pool. She looked at her own reflection alongside his and considered them both. "Is it only you?" she said. "You look like someone worth knowing." Narcissus looked at her reflection alongside his. He had not thought of himself this way before, as someone worth knowing rather than simply someone worth looking at. The difference between those two things was larger than it appeared. "What is the difference?" he asked, because he was paying attention and he could sense that she meant something more than she had literally said. Echo thought about this, which she would not have done before. She would simply have answered from whatever came first. Now she sat with the question for a moment and let the answer come from deeper down. "Looking," she said finally, "stays on the surface. Knowing goes inside. You can look at the reflection all afternoon and you will always see the same thing. But if you know someone, if you truly know them, you keep discovering new things, because people are more than what they look like, much more, and that more is where all the interesting parts are." Narcissus looked at her. He had not expected this. He had not, until this moment, had very many conversations that asked him to think rather than simply to receive admiration. He found that he liked it, that there was something in it that felt like a door opening. "How do you get to know someone?" he asked. Echo almost smiled. "You listen to them," she said. They sat by the pool for the rest of that afternoon. And Echo listened to Narcissus, and Narcissus, who was new to being truly listened to, found things coming out of him that surprised him. Thoughts and feelings and observations that had been inside him unexamined and that now, given the space of Echo's attention, began to take shape and become clear. He talked about what it was like to always be looked at, and how strange it was that this could feel like being invisible, how being admired for what you looked like could sometimes feel like not being seen at all. He talked about wondering who he was underneath the thing that other people saw when they looked at him. And Echo, who was changed by what she had learned from Hera's words and from her long practice of listening, heard all of it. She heard not just the words but what was underneath them, the genuine longing to be known rather than merely admired, the genuine question of who he was. The genuine openness of someone who has not been asked to think about themselves clearly before and who finds, when the question is offered with kindness and without judgment, that they want very much to try to answer it. The afternoon grew long and the light turned gold and the pool was very still. And the willow trailed its fingers in the water, and everything was warm and quiet and full of something that felt like the particular piece of two people being genuinely present with each other. When they finally rose and walked together out of the hollow and across the meadow in the long last light of the day, something had changed in Narcissus that was not dramatic and was not sudden but was real. He walked differently, not with less grace but with more groundedness. As if something that had been floating slightly above the earth had settled gently down and found the ground and found it solid and good. He had seen himself, truly seen himself, not in the pool's reflection, but in Echo's listening, and what he had seen was more interesting and more real and more worth knowing than anything a pool of still water could ever show. Echo walked beside him and was quiet for a while in the comfortable way that you can be quiet with someone when you have shared something real with them. And the silence does not feel empty but full of the thing you shared. Then she said, "You have a good voice when you use it for honest things." Narcissus thought about this. "You have taught me something today," he said. "About listening." "You taught yourself," said Echo. "I only made a little room." This is what she had learned, from the stillness Hera had asked of her and from all the long listening she had practiced since. That making room for someone else, truly making room, not waiting for your turn to speak, but genuinely opening yourself to what they are carrying and letting it in, is its own kind of gift, perhaps the most important kind. That listening is not passive. It is one of the most active things you can do. It takes your whole self, your whole attention, your willingness to be changed by what you hear. After that day, Echo continued to live in her forest and on her hillsides, but she was different in a way that the forest could feel. She still talked, still used her beautiful voice for the beautiful thing it was meant for, but now her talking was shaped by her listening. And her words came from a deeper and quieter place, and they had more weight and more warmth than before. And something else happened, something that surprised her and moved her very much. She discovered that the hills listened back. When she called out over a valley, her voice came back to her, softened and changed slightly by the distance it had traveled, by all the air and stone and water it had passed through. And when it came back, it was like hearing herself from the outside, like understanding something about her own voice that she could not hear from the inside. The sound of herself returning to her was something she had never noticed before. Because before she had been too busy making the next sound to hear the return of the previous one. But now she heard it. And she found it beautiful. Not in a self-admiring way, not the way Narcissus had first looked at his own reflection with something more complicated than simple vanity. She found it beautiful the way you find a beloved voice beautiful when you hear it after an absence, with a warmth and a recognition and a gladness. The echo of her voice in the hills became something she loved, a way. The world reflected back what she gave it, showing her who she was in the most literal possible way. She would sing into a valley and wait for the song to come back, and she would listen to what came back and find in it something she had not heard when she was making the original sound, some quality of her own voice that the distance and the hills and the open air had clarified. Other people heard it too. Children walking in the mountains would call out and hear their own voices return to them from the hillsides, softer and further away, but still theirs, still recognizable, and they would feel something they would not have words for yet. But that was something like the discovery that the world holds what you give it, keeps it, gives it back to you changed by the journey it has taken. still yours but also something more. Hera, walking through the forest one day, heard echoes singing in a high place above the trees. Singing to the hills and listening to the hills sing back, and she paused and listened for a long time with a small and private smile. She had not told Echo to find this. She had only told her to listen. And Echo had listened, and the listening had taken her to this particular and personal gift, this ability to hear herself in the world and hear the world in herself. That is how it works, Hera thought, walking on through the quiet forest. The lessons worth learning are never the ones you teach directly. They are the ones people find for themselves when they have been given the right kind of space. And in the high meadow and on the hillsides and in the green valleys full of the sound of streams, Echo's voice lived, and lives still. On clear days, when the air is very still and the world is quiet and you are somewhere high enough and open enough, you can hear it. The return of something that was called out, coming back softened and sweet, a little distant, a little changed by the journey, but still itself. Still warm, still recognizable as something that was once spoken with a whole heart into the open air of the world. That is the echo, and it is not loneliness, as it is sometimes mistaken for. It is the opposite of loneliness. It is the proof that the world is listening. That when you speak truly and openly and with your whole self, the world holds your voice and gives it back to you, changed but not gone, traveling but not lost, yours always, even when it is very far away. Listen for it, little one, in the quiet moments. In the mountains and the open places. In the sound of your own voice when you speak truly. The world is listening, and it always has been, and it will give back what you give it, softened and sweet. Coming from a little further away than you expected, but still warm, still real, still yours. You did well today, my little love. Now let your eyes grow heavy, and let the night wrap around you like a soft blanket. Sleep well, sweet dreams, and rest deeply.